Hi, my name is Lisa Aguirre, and welcome to our Corporate Compliance Practice Group, second in a series of best practices. This is on interviewing. If you've recruited successfully, you'll have at hand a slew of resumes from qualified candidates. The next step in the hiring process is the interview. Methods exist to help decide whom to interview and what steps to follow to take a candidate from potential employee to new hire. Just as you can't ask certain questions in an employment application, you can't ask certain questions during the interview. Today we're going to talk about selecting ideal candidates, conducting the interviews, asking the right and wrong questions, learning about candidates, and making the employment offer. Seeking ideal candidates. Compare applications to the job description to see if an applicant is a good match. Use the grid method to sort through a tall stack of applications quickly and efficiently. Create a grid with the candidate's name across the top. Then down the side, list the requirements taken from your job description. Rank each candidate on a scale from 0 to 5, indicating how strongly each meets the job requirement. Base your ranking on evidence contained in their application. The grid tool can be used as evidence of legitimate screening practices. Be familiar with the state and federal discrimination laws contained in the California Fair Employment and Housing Act and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Consider a preliminary phone interview to whittle your search. Schedule the call to give the applicant advance notice. Conducting interviews. Prepare in advance a set of core questions that you ask every candidate. Doing so will give each candidate an equal opportunity to speak to the things you're interested in and will supply you with comparable information. It will also keep the conversation focused and will help avoid discriminatory topics. Be sure to maintain only objective notes to avoid any inference or discriminatory motives. Design questions from the criteria contained in the job description. This is a good way to test candidate skills. Behavior-based interview questions get candidates to tell how they handled specific situations that are comparable to those they may encounter at your company. For example, ask, what specific tasks in your current job duties do you complete first, and which do you tend to leave until last? Word questions to elicit lengthy responses as opposed to yes or no answers. There are right and wrong questions to ask in an interview. I've listed some of them here. Others are, the right question might be, are you willing and able to travel? Can you work overtime if needed? Is there anything that might make you leave this job? How has your prior experience helped prepare you for this job? These are all right questions. Wrong questions are questions that tend to expose whether someone is in a protected class and could lead to an accusation of discrimination. So, for example, in addition to those questions listed on this slide, you cannot ask things like, do you have or are you planning to have children? Are you married? Do you go to church? Are you single? Do you live alone? All of these questions tend to elicit responses that may allow you to discover whether or not the candidate is in a protected class. For example, whether or not the candidate has children, etc. So be wary of the right and wrong questions that you can ask in interviews. We will expand on this in our blog post, which will be posted later this week on Thursday. Learning about candidates. This is important. You want to know as much as you can about your candidate prior to making the job offer. Conduct reference checks. Courts have held that employers are liable for negligent hiring when employees perform certain acts that the employer should have known might occur. Reference checks help avoid these allegations. Document even attempted reference checks. Physical exams that test job functions and drug tests are always at the employer's expense and are lawful after a conditional job offer has been made. Be consistent. All candidates for comparable positions must undergo the same tests. Psychological and written character tests may also be given. Get them from a reputable source and administer them uniformly and fairly. Skill tests are a way to assess how a candidate can perform an essential job function. An example of a skill test is a keyboarding test for a data entry person. Credit checks and investigative consumer reports may be obtained, however, certain restrictions do apply. Be careful not to invade an applicant's privacy. Do not call references without express permission from the applicant. This is best obtained by having the applicant sign a waiver on the employment application. Making an employment offer. Always make the offer in writing. Be sure that you compose an offer letter that includes, among other things, all of these specific types of information. What is the job title? Is the position exempt or non-exempt? What is the starting salary? What is the work schedule? Is it full or part-time? Are there any conditions? For example, is this conditioned on a medical exam or passage of a drug test? Be sure to include an at-will statement. An at-will statement means that the employment can be terminated either by the employer or the employee at any time with or without advance notice. This statement is important to preclude the employee from ever suggesting or arguing that you've created an employment contract with them for a certain amount of time. Include a deadline by which the offer must be accepted. If you have other requirements of the job, for example, requiring all new hires to sign confidentiality and proprietary information agreements, be sure to include that as well. Thank you for listening to our short presentation on interviewing. Stay tuned to our accompanying blog, which will post on July 7th. It will have this and much more information that you might need in order to successfully interview. Also, feel free to keep in touch with me at the email, address, and telephone number listed below. You can also connect with all of the Focal Point coaches by going to our website, www.norcalbusinesscoaching.com. Thank you very much for listening.